Hi, my name is Johan, and in this video we'll have a look at how we can work with markers on a Mapbox map in a Noodle project. In the previous videos, we set up the Mapbox module and created a simple information pop-up, and this is a continuation of where we left off in those videos. We will learn how we can add and remove markers to a Mapbox map, as well as capture when a user clicks a marker and not the map. Let's get started. So here we are back in our project from the previous videos. Everything is working as before, and now I want to create a marker on the map every time I click on it. Each marker will be represented by a Noodle object node, and we will store all these objects in an array node. Each marker object needs to keep track of its longitude and latitude, as well as a color that we can assign the marker. Before we get started creating objects, let's add an array node that will hold all the marker objects. I'm going to zoom out slightly to make some more room, and then add the array node and give it the ID map markers. This array is currently empty, but it will contain all our markers in the future. Conveniently, if you give the Mapbox Map node an array of items, it will take care of rendering them for us. So let's connect the items output from the array to the Mapbox map, which, like I said, is currently empty, so we won't see anything on the map yet. Next, let's add a create new object node, and I'm just going to name it create new marker object for clarity. Just like I said before, we want every marker object to keep track of its longitude and latitude and a color. So let's add those as properties here on the create new object node. Long and lat should be numbers, and the color is a color, but we will specify it as a string. Oops, not as any, but as a string, like I said. We've already seen that when we click on the map, we can get the click positions long and lat, so let's feed that into the create new object node. And then let's just fill in the string black directly in the create new object node. This means all our markers will be black. Let's also have the click signal from the Mapbox map connect to the do action of the create new object. Now, every time we click on the map, we create a new object, but we still don't see anything, and that's because we also need to add these new marker objects into the array. To get this newly created object into an array, I will use an insert object into array node. Let's take the array ID from the array and connect it to the insert object into array node. And then from the create new object, we will get the actual object ID. And let's also have the done signal from the creation of the object tell the insert node to go ahead and insert. Now, when I start to click on the map, I get a nice marker. Pretty awesome. Okay, so the next step is to be able to do something when the user clicks a marker. So we need to differentiate between clicking on the map and clicking on a marker. Conveniently, there's an additional outgoing signal on the Mapbox Map node called marker click that we can use for this purpose. I will need to add a few other nodes to get all of this tied together. First, I'm going to add a variable node, and I'm going to call it current marker. This variable will contain the ID of the currently selected marker, and with that ID, we can get the marker object which contains the long and lat for the marker. To set this variable to a specific ID, I need to use the setVariable node, so let's add one of those. I'll take the name from the variable and connect it to the name input on the set variable, and then I want this to be set every time I click a marker. So let's make some connections from the Mapbox Map node. From the marker clicked section, I'll connect the marker click signal to the do action on the set variable, and then the marker ID to the value. Now, the current marker contains the ID for the object that we want to display information about. So let's create an object node and add the long and lat properties. And then connect the value from the current marker variable to the ID of the object node. Next, we connect the outputs from the object to the two text nodes. And look at that. Now when we click the markers, the information panel updates. We also want to make sure that we set the current marker variable when a new marker is created. So let's add another set variable and hook it up like this. We also want to make sure the pop-up panel always shows when we've created a new marker, so let's make the following connections. And we should also show the panel when I click a marker, so let's add this connection too. The way I have designed this, I could remove the connections from the Mapbox map to the two text nodes, since we always get the info from our marker objects now. I'll leave that as an exercise for you to do. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is to add the ability to remove markers. To do that, let's add a button to the pop-up panel like this. I'm going to make it have a red background so it's clear that it's a destructive function. Then I'm going to remove the label and add an icon to it. Let's select some icon that represents deletion. Maybe this one. And then I'm just going to do some updating of the padding and icon spacing and such so that it looks somewhat good. Alright, there's my delete button, and when I click this, I want the marker to disappear. Now, I need a node that deletes objects, so let me search for that. Oh, that's right, it's called remove object from array, so let's add that. Let me just move stuff around a bit, and then we need to tell the remove object from array node which object we want to remove and from what array. So let's take the object ID from the current marker variable and then the array ID from the array. Then I want the button's click signal to actually do the removing, so let's make a connection like this. Now let's try it. Let's remove this marker here. Nice, that works. Let's try a few more. So you might notice that the panel stays up when I delete the markers, but we can fix that by making a connection like this. Thanks for following along in this small example on how to use the Mapbox module in Noodle. I hope it was helpful and that you have lots of fun noodling.